What if I told you that the world's grandest spectacle wasn't celebrated with champions, but with agony so intense it echoed for centuries? Welcome to ancient Rome, where entertainment could mean your last breath. At sunrise, the arenas of Rome pulsed with anticipation, their colossal arches basking in daylight, while yesterday's blood still clung stubbornly to the stone. Vendors barked from beneath the stands, baskets overflowing with olives and watered wine, the air thick with the promise of both refreshment and violence. In the bowels of the Colosseum, half-starved lions paced with ribs jutting from their fur, elephants stamped in rage, and handlers shoved panthers into cages so tight the beast could barely turn. From the tunnels came the sharp clang of swords, no practice swings but tests for the day's killing steel. Over it all, a low hum swelled, blossoming into the roar of tens of thousands. Romans didn't just crave entertainment, they demanded to see death dressed up as a show. The arena was not merely sport, it was a laboratory of cruelty, designed more thoroughly than any stage. Emperors flooded the sands with blood, staging elaborate naval battles, starving animals to heighten suspense, and forcing prisoners to reenact legends in mythic costumes, only to end with real corpses. None of this was chance. It ran in the veins of Roman policy, woven into the fabric that bound emperor to citizen. When the crowd cheered, it wasn't just thrill, it was loyalty echoing through the heart of the empire. Let's dive into the core of the darkness. What were the most inhumane spectacles that went too far, even for Rome? Step through the iron gates. Your seat awaits. Gladiatorial beginnings. Blood is duty. The first gladiatorial combat in Rome didn't spark with golden trumpets or royal fanfare. It began in solemn duty. In 264 BC, the sons of Decimus Junius Brutus Sceva chose not to honor their father with statues or prayers, but with blood. 3 pairs of slaves were armed and sent to fight to the death in the Forum Boarium, a market choking with the stench of dung and smoke. This was not for entertainment, it was a munus, an obligation to honor the dead. Its roots traced to far older customs. In nearby Campania, warriors were slain beside graves to appease restless spirits. The meaning twisted over time. Instead of random victims, the dead demanded combat between chosen men. But funerals were only the beginning. By the 3rd century BC, Roman leaders saw how these fights could do more than honor ancestors. They could steady politics. Religious festivals, once solemn offerings to Jupiter, began featuring blood. The Senate presented these spectacles as acts of piety, but everyone understood the underlying truth. State-sponsored violence to keep the masses loyal. Even armor told stories. Early fighters wore the forms of Rome's conquered enemies. The Samnite took the heavy shield, the Thracian brandished the curved blade, the Gaul wielded a broad sword. Every drop of blood retold Rome's victories, transforming death into propaganda. As the carnage grew, so did the venues. Temporary wood stands evolved into stone temples to violence, packed with thousands. No longer were the games for grieving families. They belonged to the state. Every spilled drop whispered the same message. Rome didn't just command armies. Rome commanded death itself. What started as ritual sacrifice morphed into theater. Duty became obsession, and Rome discovered a new weapon: domination over the living and the meaning of dying. The hunts, empire versus nature. The crowd's roar wasn't reserved for men. Sometimes it thundered for beasts hauled from the farthest edges of the known world. Lions from Africa, leopards from the Caucasus, crocodiles from the Nile, even giraffes dragged across deserts. These creatures weren't displayed as wonders, but condemned as prey. Roman venaciones, animal hunts, were spectacles about domination. Julius Caesar made his mark by parading a giraffe, the first ever seen in Europe. The Romans, lacking a word for it, called it a camelopard, half camel, half leopard. The awe didn't last. The animal was hurled into the sand and torn apart for the crowd's pleasure. The message wasn't subtle. If Rome could seize the strangest beasts alive, it could conquer anything. The slaughter escalated. When the Colosseum opened in 80 AD under Emperor Titus, more than 9,000 animals died in a single festival. Archaeologists discovered animal bones engraved with deliberate marks of starvation, evidence lions and bears were weakened before release to guarantee a quick, bloody kill. Elephants, once the terror of Roman armies under Hannibal, were herded into the arena and butchered for applause. Behind the scenes, the logistics were a spectacle themselves. Exotic animals had to be trapped, dragged across deserts, kept alive only long enough to meet their doom. Caravans rattled chains over scorching sands, fleets floated cages down the Nile, and handlers risked their lives to present living trophies. To see a panther in the wild was dangerous enough. To watch one explode from its cage in front of 50,000 spectators, now that was imperial power made visible. Each animal was a living souvenir of conquest. Rome's appetite for blood was limitless, and emperors like Commodus made the hunts private displays of ego, striding into the arena dressed as Hercules, slaughtering hundreds of animals himself. But most of these contests were rigged. Starved, chained, or maimed beasts faced a guarantee of death at the emperor's hand. The crowd's cheers had little to do with admiration. They cheered because to do otherwise could mean their own demise. In silence, a quieter tragedy unfolded. Ancient writers mourned rare species vanishing from their homelands. Rome's theaters weren't just staging death. They were ecological wrecking balls driving lions, leopards, and elephants toward extinction. Gladiators, the twisted reality. Imagine a gladiator, two skilled warriors locked in noble combat. Reality shattered that image. Rome thrived on imbalance, on contests engineered for cruelty. Weapons were designed to inflict pain. Rules absurdly stacked to ensure that some fighters never stood a chance. Prisoners and condemned criminals, often dressed as clowns and handed wooden swords, were shoved into the arena, sent to die against seasoned killers. The crowd jeered as these doomed souls flailed and fell. Public execution disguised as sport. Even the weapons became characters in Rome's blood theater. The retiarius fought with net and trident, facing the secutor, whose rounded helmet could deflect the net. It was less about skill than suspense. A living riddle. Would the net ensnare or the sword break through? The numbers grew monstrous. One gladiator versus several foes, entire units clashing like miniature armies. The arena floor transformed into a swamp of blood, splintered shields, mangled corpses. And just when novelty seemed to wear thin, Rome pushed further. Female gladiators or gladiatrices first stepped onto the sand in the 1st century AD. Writers mocked them, but the records prove they fought real battles, facing dwarves, beasts, and even each other. Their presence blurred gender lines but reinforced a darker truth. No one man or woman escaped Rome's hunger for spectacle. Armor wasn't always protection, it was punishment. Some helmets narrowed vision, muffled sound, forced fighters to stumble, half blind while the audience roared with laughter. Others weighed so heavily that raising one's head became a contest all its own. Then came propaganda plays. Gladiators dressed as barbarians, forced to act out Rome's mythic victories, their inevitable defeat driving home the lesson. The empire always prevailed. Every mismatch, every twist, every stunt was designed to keep crowds shocked, obedient, and wanting more. The Colosseum never settled for repetition. It was a factory inventing new cruelties, always chasing the next thrill. By midday, the sand was soaked with blood, and the crowd craved fresh horror. The Roman arena shifted gears, transforming death itself into theater. Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. For the condemned, this was not a trial. It was a script written by others. Criminals, deserters, rebellious slaves, and prisoners of war. These unwilling actors were forced into mythic roles, their punishment turned into gruesome performance art. Thieves torn apart by wolves, arsonists burned alive, traitors hurled to lions. Each scene became a morality play painted in real blood. The scale could stagger belief. Emperor Trajan, celebrating his Dacian victories, orchestrated the slaughter of thousands of captives over 103 relentless days. It wasn't just carnage, it was drama, every death crafted to keep the audience spellbound. Animals became the stars of this nightmare. Lions, bears, and leopards, held in chains, starved to fury before release, were unleashed on trembling victims. The uncertainty, would the beast kill quickly or toy with its prey? The anticipation kept the stands howling for more. Often the cruelty wore the mask of legend. Prisoners staged doomed heroes, Orpheus torn apart by wild beasts, Prometheus chained as vultures circled. These weren't stories anymore. They were performances, with sand for a stage and death as the closing act. Executions weren't merely killing, they were grotesque plays, where flesh became drama. Some victims faced crucifixion within the arena, nailed to timbers as vendors sold wine and children played nearby. Others were forced into the tunica molesta, a shirt soaked in pitch, ignited until the condemned became living torches, flames writhing toward the sky. These killings weren't entertainment alone. They were warnings, propaganda carved into living flesh. Defy Rome and die slowly, with tens of thousands watching. Not everyone could stomach it. Philosophers like Seneca lamented the midday executions, warning they hardened the soul and poisoned daily life. Yet his protest drowned beneath the thunder of crowds demanding punishment as thrill. Naval battles, oceans of blood. Rome's imagination soared beyond sand and sword. Sometimes emperors demanded real oceans inside the city, mock naval battles, or naumachii, staged on insane scales. Julius Caesar dug an enormous basin, filled it with water, and set thousands of condemned aboard ships to fight as rival fleets. Augustus expanded on this, with 30 warships battling in a massive artificial lake, each crammed with doomed prisoners. One of history's most haunting lines comes from these spectacles, morituri te salutant. Those who are about to die salute you. Rome's arenas weren't only about blood, they were about control, shaping minds as well as bodies. Every hunt, every execution, every myth reborn into screams served the same end: to make power look eternal. And inscribed in those ruins behind centuries of faded applause is a warning. A civilization that glorifies violence eventually crumbles beneath its own applause. Which of these spectacles, the hunts, the living torches, or the emperors drunk on their own shows, best reveals Rome's darkest soul? The sand may be silent now, but the echoes of cruelty still linger, waiting for us to remember and reconsider what it means when entertainment goes too far. If this journey through Rome's infamous spectacles gripped you, subscribe for more untold stories, share your thoughts below, and help us keep history alive. Your support fuels our exploration of the human past, so join our community and never miss the next powerful episode.